As the modern workplace evolves, many professionals are exploring side hustles to supplement their income, pursue passion projects, or even to also diversify their skills. However, navigating the complexities of outside employment can be challenging, especially when it comes to conflicts of interest. While understanding what constitutes a conflict of interest, existing policy landscapes, and also strategies for negotiating employment contracts is crucial for professionals looking to balance their primary job with external accomplishments. Well, joining me to get more insights is Johan Botes, Head of Employment and Compensation at Baker McKenzie. So welcome to our show on Africa's Side Hustle.
Very, very great to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Prudence. Looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, just to start off the conversation, what is a conflict of interest, and just for a basic side hustler, what does it mean?
Okay. So we are on a primary employment relationship. So 9 to 5, I do my day job. With that day job comes a duty that I owe to my employer who pays my salary, that I must act in that employer's best interest. And that is the duty of fidelity. So when I make my service available to you and in return you remunerate me, that is the essence of the employment contract, and inherent in that arrangement is the fact that I must promote your business interest, not my own. I must not do anything that will be in conflict of interest of the business that you are employing me to do. So that is the conflict of interest element. My primary obligation when I'm employed by you is that I must serve your business interest. I must not act in my own interest, but I must act in the interest of your business, the one that you're paying me to do.
So what laws and regulations could one take note of?
The main basis relating to the conflict of interest comes from our common law, and this is the law that has been developed over centuries. So from time immemorial, when an employee places their productive capacity available to an employer, this obligation has arisen. That listen, you must further my business interest and act in my best interest, not in your own. So there's definitely a whole host of cases and judgments decided over the years that spells out exactly what this is. But at its essence, it is a duty to act in the best interest of the employer. We have statutory obligations, that impacts on the employment relationship. In terms of the Labour Relations Act, employees have a right to be treated fairly in the workplace and not to be unfairly terminated. So all of those rules would impact on my ability to do other work. Should I decide to do that? But for an entrepreneur trying to or considering a side hustle, I would say probably one of the first places you're going to need to look at is your existing employment contract. Have a look at your employment contract and see what does it say. Does it specifically say you're allowed to do certain things after hours or you're not to do certain things, and then lay it into that, the policies of that specific workplace. Because we quite often find that, especially with larger employers, multinational employers, global employers, they have expressed policies dealing with this and say, this is what you can and what you can't do. These are the boundaries. This is what we consider to be your private conduct that is none of our concern, versus if you do things like this, we're going to take issue with you.
Yeah. So can you provide examples of what kind of side hustles could actually cause a conflict of interest?
So there's some really good cases from our Labour Appeal Court over the year. One that I had a look at fairly recently dealt with an employee who was employed in a butchery, for instance, and then decided to open up his own shop. In his private time, not during working hours, over the weekend, eventually employed somebody else to run this business for him. And ultimately, the employer found out and terminated him, dismissed him. And the issue there was that this business that you are running is actually competing with me. So when you compete with me, fundamentally what you're doing is that you're not abiding by that critical principle that when I employ you, I pay your salary. Inherent in that arrangement is that you will further my business interest. You will not do anything that can harm my business or detracts from my business. And when you set up shop in competition with me, that's you cannot reconcile that with your duty to act in my best interest. So at a very base level, I think the fundamental should be that you cannot do something that is similar or competing with what your existing employer is doing. Yeah. So if I sell Tupperware, after hours, I can't imagine that my workplace is going to have an issue with it, because we're not in that business. We do nothing like that. But if I'm now as a lawyer employed in a law firm, going to provide legal advice for my own pocket after hours or over the weekend, I am absolutely convinced that my partners and the workplace would have a difficulty with that, because that is the business that I'm employed to do. So when I get opportunities to do legal work, for instance, I must exploit that to the benefit of my employer, not my own pocket. So if you're considering what it is that you can do, one of the things that should always be a red flag for you is this similar to what I'm doing in my primary job? And if so, then what? Because that then what could relate to, do I have to disclose it to my employer? Do I have to get permission from the employer? And that is where looking at your employment contract and the policies of the business can give you some good guidance.
So when coming to one now having a non-profit organization and also having a full-time job, does it correlate to also having some type of conflict of interest? So how does one navigate that?
That is a really good question, because it's not only when I do a side hustle for remuneration that I could land myself in trouble with my main employer. It's even where I do non-remunerative work. And there the fundamental principles been developed over the centuries is that I cannot do anything that will cause harm to my employer and harm to my employer's reputation. If I do things after hours that will embarrass my employer, that will make it difficult for them to continue working with me, that gives them the right to take action against me and even terminate my employment. So if I'm employed as a lawyer, now I go and have a side hustle where I'm the chairman of a non-profit organization, but that does something that's completely incompatible with what I do in my primary employment. So I'm employed by the church, and my side hustle is that I'm also I sit on the board of a non-profit organization that does something that does really not sit well with the church. Then my side hustle will get me into trouble. So I would say at all stages, if you're considering doing this, have a discussion with your employer.
Yeah.
Say, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Would it cause an issue if I were to do this? So that disclosure obligation is probably the threshold for you keeping yourself on the right side of the law. Some businesses may require more than disclosure. Some would require active permission before you can do it. But if you don't disclose, almost inevitably, you're going to land yourself in hot water at some stage or another, whether you do this for remuneration or not.
Let's talk more on those risks. So why is it actually important for a side hustler to review the policies of the company that they're actually employed at?
Because the policies may give guidance. The policies may say things like what we're discussing now. We don't take issue with you if you do work outside of business hours, as long as it doesn't interfere with the business. So if you don't compete with us and you do something that's completely not related to the business and you don't embarrass us, we're not going to see things on social media that this is what you're doing in your private life, and our clients are going to say to us, but how do you allow your people to do things like this that are completely immoral or illegal or otherwise? So if you're not going to embarrass me, you're not going to compete with me. Yeah. Those are the sort of guidance that will typically be in policies. Other policies may be more prescriptive and say you may not do any other work, whether for remuneration or not, unless you get our prior written consent. And that is an example that is frequently found in many employment contracts and in many policies, workplace policies. So it's important for you to understand that, because those policies and employment contracts supplement our common law. So my common law obligation is I may not compete with you, I may not embarrass you, I must further your business interests as my employer. But read into that, or on top of that, are further obligations that we agree in the employment contract, and further obligations that the employer can unilaterally impose through policies.
We live in an economy where we actually need multiple streams of income, which actually delves into having a side hustle. So actually, how does one balance having your main job and also having your side hustles, just to delve deeper into that?
I think, especially in our South African context, many employers would have great sympathy for employees who have the need to have a side hustle. My mom, at various stages had 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, trying to get all of us through school. So I really appreciate that this is often what we need to do rather than what we want to do, in order to make ends meet. So I think South African employers will have greater appreciation for this than in many other jurisdictions where the financial need may not be as pressing. But if you if you're going to start a side hustle like that, I think you need to just be sanguine about the fact that my employer is going to take issue with me if I don't pay attention to what I'm doing at work. So if I now have a side hustle that's going to cause me to work 8 hours night shift, and then come back in the morning and still expect to do, 8 hours at work, something's going to give. So if I come to work, I'm tired, I don't pay attention to what I'm doing, I'm going to run into difficulty there. So I should choose a side hustle that not only is not going to compete with my employer, that not only is not going to embarrass my employer or be in breach of my contract or the workplace policies, but it's also not going to interfere with my work duties. So if you have that sort of framework and say, where am I going to land myself in trouble and how do I avoid it? I think that could give you some good guidance as to what are those opportunities that I can exploit. So do I go and do online trading, for instance, after hours? I'm doing it for myself. I'm not doing anybody else harm. I'm not competing. I'm not going to my employer's clients and say, hey, during daytime I'm a lawyer, but you do work for us. Don't you also want to buy some stuff from me after hours? That could land me into trouble, because what happens now if this client that's also my employer's client now gets upset with me because what I'm doing in my private life? That could interfere with that client's relationship with my employer. So if my employer says, Johan, we had this wonderful client, they no longer want to do business with us because you sold the managing director a car, which is part of your side hustle, and now he's upset about that, and now they're taking their business away from us. That will land me in trouble with my employer. So you want to avoid situations like that. So I hope I'm not creating this impression that it's so very complex and you should absolutely just avoid this at all costs, because that's not the case. If you just apply some common sense and try and look at it from an employer's perspective, I'm employing you, you're going to provide your services to me, you're going to dedicate your time and attention to me when you're at work, and you're not going to do stuff to embarrass me or to cause my business harm. So as long as you do those sort of things and you tell me in advance, and where you agreed in your contract that you will get my written permission, you get that written permission, then by and large, I think many employers would not take issue with employees doing side hustles.
Okay. And just before I let you go, is it really important, or rather are there certain companies that can be able to support an employee's side hustle, rather to have that correlation with each other?
Absolutely. We have developed and created opportunities for us that actually for staff who actually then started businesses as a result of that. Within the transport industry, said, listen, we're using external service provider. If you want to start a business, that thing, we will support you. So there are many opportunities like that where, as part of an employer's community involvement, commitment to our society, can say, I'm going to make these opportunities available, and I'm going to start with my own staff and say, if any of you want to exploit these opportunities, we are willing to assist. We're willing to assist with training, willing to assist with funding, we're willing to assist by giving you time off to go and explore that. So I think progressive companies will look at things like that, not from a perspective of this is a threat to our business, but actually this is a way for us to empower our people and to allow them to be the best versions of themselves in respect of what they're doing. And if in the process they develop a business and grow the economy, then, I think we're all winning it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's show on Side Hustle. And that was Johan Botes, Head of Employment and Compensation at Baker McKenzie, just giving us important insights on a conflict of interest in the workplace. As we conclude today's episode, remember that Africa's entrepreneurial spirit is unstoppable. Share your hustle story with us on social media using #AfricaSideHustle. Don't forget to subscribe for more entrepreneurial stories, business news and insights on CNBCAfrica.com. Till next week.